Linguists are extremely funny people, and oftentimes we see the funny side in things like normal people might watch Star Wars and say, hey, it's funny because Yoda is talking funny. But if you're a linguist, you will listen to Yoda and say, that's funny because of syntax. This is also funny because of syntax. So syntax, we're talking about sentences. How do you know the meaning of the whole sentence by what order the words are in or even what words are there? So the key thing we're looking at is how do you even define a sentence? Because that's where we're going. Now, a nice definition of sentence, a technical linguistic definition, is basically a whole string of words that is expressing a complete thought. So that makes sense. It's a string of words that put together get some kind of full piece of meaning across. Another definition which is very helpful is that a complete sentence will need to have a subject and a predicate. This is a traditional sort of English textbook way of describing things. Now, what does that mean? Subject is the grammatical term for the person or the thing that is doing the verb in a sentence. So you have to have in a sentence a subject who is doing whatever the action is. And then the predicate is the verb, because that has to be there, and everything else that is attached to it. And more importantly, it has to have a finite verb form there. So something that's actually telling you, is it present or past, or, past or non-past. So the verb and everything else attached to it is what we call, in English linguistics, a predicate. So for example, the old man enjoyed the movie. The subject is the old man. The old man is doing the verb, which is to enjoy, and the predicate then is enjoyed the movie. So the verb and then whatever you did the verb to and all that put together. So subject, predicate. Here's some more examples. Stan and Lisa walk their dogs in the park. The subject is Stan and Lisa because they together, two people. So it's you could say they, and then the verb walked their dogs in the park is your predicate. You don't have to wait for me. You are the subject. Don't have to wait for me is the predicate. Steve-O showered, shaved, and got dressed. That one's interesting because you've put 3 finite verbs there in the predicate, but it's still essentially all working together, just one long string of it. The subject remains Steve-O, and he's doing all 3 of those verbs, probably in order. Right, so that's a sentence. Has a subject and a predicate. Good, so far so good. So what's not a sentence? Well, if it breaks our rule and it doesn't have both a subject and a predicate, it's probably not a sentence. It's probably just a phrase. Now, are we good with our word classes? Because to define what kind of phrases we have here, you're going to need to know what a noun, verb, adjective, all those things are. So it might be worth going back and revising them if you're a bit vague on it. So anyway, nouns are a name of a person, place, object, or an idea. They can be pretty abstract, as well as it can be an object that's a real thing you can touch. It could be something abstract like strength or ambition. A verb is a doing word with a very broad sense of that includes being as something that you're doing. An adjective is something that modifies a noun. An adverb modifies a verb or an adjective, or an adverb basically modifies anything else that's not a noun. And a key thing that we're going to talk about with adverbs through the whole of syntax is an adverb tells you how, where, or when the verb is happening. That last definition there, remember that because this is going to come up a bunch of times. Alrighty, so we're good with that. That's good. Phrase is what you call a group of words that are working together as a grammatical unit. So you might have 3 or 4 words together that in the sentence are acting as a noun, but actually only one of the words might be a noun. But the whole string of words together, that's the function it's doing. Now, there are different types of phrase, and mostly we're going to define the phrases by the structure of what is the word in the phrase that everything else is referring to. So you're going to have a word there that all of the other words are telling you about. And this word is called the head. That's the grammatical term for it when you've got a phrase. So if you've got a phrase like this one, the hairy old man, have a think for a second. What word are all the other words telling us about? And hopefully you worked out the head is man, because the, hairy, and old are all telling us about the man. So the head is the noun man. So the noun and all of its determiners and adjectives as a group is called a noun phrase because the head is a noun. What about this one? Really quite old. Which word there are the other words referring to? What's the head? Hopefully you work out the head is old. So really and quite are telling you how old. Old is an adjective. So this is an adjective phrase. You also might have older than my grandma. You've put the head at the start, but that's still an adjective phrase because than my grandma is telling you about how much older. It's still telling you about the adjective. So that is an adjective phrase. Alrighty. What about verb phrases? Can we make a phrase with a verb in it? Because so far we've just had other things. No, absolutely you can. And some verbs are always phrases. Something like to run away. We talked about this. This is a phrasal verb because it's got more than one word in it. The key word there, the head, is run. And then the to and the away are helping, fill out the whole thing. And you can even then chuck in some adverbs. So ran away or ran off. You might say quickly ran off. The head is still the verb ran, so this is a verb phrase. So the verb and any adverbs that are helping out and adding some colour are together, they're functioning as a verb phrase, the key word there. If you think about it, if you look at the whole predicate of any given sentence, the predicate as a whole is kind of always going to be a verb phrase because it's always got the finite verb there that everything else is referring back to. What about this? We've got a cat who is stuck under the back seat of the car. All right. What's the head here? Got to think about this one. The head is the preposition under because the back seat of the car is telling you under what. This together, and I should have turned the camera off, is a prepositional phrase because the head is a preposition. You might have a phrase like very slowly. So is the very telling us about the slowly or is the slowly telling us about the very? Hopefully you worked out slowly is the head. Slowly is an adverb, so that is an adverb phrase. Right, so far so good. We've got noun phrases, adjective phrases, verb phrases, prepositional phrases, and adverb phrases. There's a little bit here where it's going a little tricky. So far we've been talking about these phrases, saying what type of phrase it is by looking at the head. What is the word that the other words are referring to? But you could also define them based on how they're being used. And there's one functional definition that we're going to be using as well. So in Ynglang, you've got those 5 structural phrase definitions based on the head. So noun, verb, adjective, prepositional, and adverb. But as well as adverb phrase, you might have something else that's kind of similar. Look at this one. Onto the floor of the cinema. What's the head there? Hopefully you work out it's onto because the floor of the cinema is telling us onto what. The head is the preposition onto, so that's a prepositional phrase. At least structurally, this is a prepositional phrase. Some textbooks will also say, hang on. In a full sentence, you'd be saying something like, I throw the wrapper onto the floor of the cinema. And then that means you're telling us about the verb throw. And if you're telling us something about how or where or when you're doing a verb, what tells us about verbs? What are the words that tell us more about a verb or tell you how you're doing the verb or when or where? Those are adverbs. So, functionally, you could call it an adverbial phrase. So the word adverbial is really important. It basically means something that's acting like an adverb, even if there's no adverb there. Like in the sentence, in the phrase, onto the floor of the cinema, there is no adverb there. But the whole phrase is acting in the form of kind of like an adverb. It is telling you something about the verb throw. So we call these adverbials, and you're going to see that quite a few times in syntax. So, adverb phrase, adverbial phrase. Can we tell the difference? There is a difference. Basically, an adverb phrase is a definition that the head of this phrase is actually an adverb. But when we say adverbial, that's a functional definition. So something that is an adverbial is something that's acting like an adverb, even though the head in this phrase might be something else. Particularly, prepositional phrases will often work as adverbials. So, basically these ones, structurally, it's a prepositional phrase, into the house, the head is into. Functionally, it's an adverbial phrase because you're usually saying, I walk into the house, and the into the house is telling you about how you walked or where you walked. All right, people going, just tell me what I need to know. Okay, for the sake of Yingling, you've got these 5 structural phrase definitions, noun, verb, adjective, adverb, prepositional phrases, just based on what is the head. And then there is one functional phrase definition you're going to use as well, which is adverbial phrase, a phrase that acts like an adverb. Oftentimes, it's going to be structurally a prepositional phrase, but it's acting like an adverbial phrase. All right, so a sentence like this, the most serious threat to the snowy owl is man. Big, long sentence. We can break it up like this. The subject is the most serious threat to the snowy owl, and the predicate is man. The subject kind of has to be a noun phrase because it's got to be the thing that's doing the thing. Even if there's other words there that are telling us more about the thing, the whole thing that is the subject is kind of going to have to be a noun phrase. And then the predicate will kind of have to be a verb phrase because it will always have a verb at the center. Okay, let's break it up more. Let's break that first noun phrase there into 2 halves. So now we've got the noun phrase, the most serious threat, and then we've got a prepositional phrase, to the snowy owl, because the preposition to, and then is man is still a verb phrase here. Let's break it up more. We can break it down to some individual words now. We've got a determiner, the. Most serious is an adjective phrase, and then threat is a noun, and then to is a preposition. The snowy owl is a noun phrase. The verb is, because remember, to be is a verb, and then we've got a noun. Let's break it down even more. We can just break it down to all the words. So determiner, most is an adverb, serious is an adjective, threat is a noun, to is a preposition, the is a determiner again, snowy here is an adjective, owl is a noun, is a verb, and man is a noun. And then we put them back together. Okay, so back to put the phrases back together. Let's put the phrases, those phrases together, and then we build it all the way up. So there's phrases inside of phrases. So we've got our subject and our predicate. We put subjects and predicates together to give us a full sentence. Happy ending. There's a whole thing where linguists will break these down and make these trees saying, okay, here's our noun phrase, break down the noun phrase into a determiner, an adjective, and a noun, and so on and so forth. You don't need to know how to do this for VC Yingling, but if you Google past trees, you'll find these kind of things. You can play around with some sentences, see what you can do. Anyway, be nice to the snowy owls.